Okay, hello everyone. Um, this is new for me, so I'm gonna be a little bit slow, and it's like for some reason I cannot see all the names. But welcome everyone. I'm Daniel Mendoza. I'm the West Coast manager for Cropster since maybe less than 2 months ago, since February, I guess, like already four, I guess. I haven't been able to do much because of COVID, but I hope I can meet everybody soon in different events that hopefully we can start soon, I guess. And I'm super excited because I'm with one of my best friends, Shelby. And she's the head roaster for Huckleberry, and we've been working. Actually, we worked together for like a week or two at Huckleberry, which is awesome.
That is true. I think it was just 2 weeks while Kevin was out of town.
And then, we worked together at Corvus, and then since then, we've been hanging out in competitions everywhere, I guess. Everything that is surrounded by coffee and beer, that's us. And
yeah, we're just friends now. Great.
Yeah. You want to say something, Shelby, or we just jump on it?
I think we just jump right in.
Sweet.
I mean, you and I can just hang out and make everyone watch, but.
Let's go, because I don't want to, I start talking things. Well, I'm going to start with this. The idea of this webinar is to talk about using Shelby's experience to showcase how important or how related is cupping to roast analysis. We think that both have to be always together, and not just to cup and that's it, or just to change the curve just by how it looks, or what the purpose of the faces are, or the cupping is super related to the curve. So this is like a little bit of an image that represents what Cropster is doing right now. We are, since the farmer, we are there with Cropster Origin, and we jump into all the beginning of your company when you receive samples, sample roast, cup, then production roast, then analyze all the production, and then set profiles, help with your business with orders to roast, getting all these orders from your web store and adding it to Cropster. So we are actually in the whole chain, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy, like, when got the opportunity to work for them, because I've been in all of them, I guess. Had the opportunity to work for some producers, roasters, exporter company. So I'm super excited. Any questions, I hope at the end, feel free to ask. So we are going to focus on Cropster Cup and cupping in different environments, and the best person to talk about is Shelby. I can say that she was since roaster assistant, production roaster, head roaster, competition in US, world competition, and in different competitions also in Denver, cupping for buying events. So I'll let her talk a little bit about her experience in cupping.
Yeah. So I would say cupping is probably the very first thing that really interested me in coffee. I feel like I'm kind of the exception to the rule, where I wasn't a barista before I started roasting. I just got hired on as a production assistant, and my first thought was like, okay, I'll do this for a little while, and then eventually, like, I'll move behind the bar. And then, I don't know, after about like 2 weeks of being on the production team and cupping every day, I realized that I actually just didn't want to ever leave that space. But cupping is kind of a weird thing, because your coffee tastes so different from the way that you cup it to the way that it brews, and having an understanding of how those two things connect, from cupping table to brewing, and from roaster to roast profile to cupping, is super important. So yeah, I mean, that was the first thing that I learned in coffee, is that cupping is the most important thing that you can do to keep your quality up in your roastery. And Cropster Cup is actually a really great tool for keeping all of your cupping notes organized, because if you're using paper notes, which are great, you're going to misplace those. You're not going to be able to look back on those in a year's time, 2 years time. Let's say you're working with the same farmers year after year. If you have cupping scores from the past 3 years from that farm, from that lot, that can actually be a really helpful tool, not just for yourself, but good feedback for the farms that you work with.
Yeah, and another thing that I did not mention is experience different machines. And the reason why that's important is in each of those environments that she's been to, she's exposed to this machine, so you need to cup in order to keep playing with the same equipment. What does this mean? Especially in competitions as a head roaster too, when your machine is down, you have to check for friends, let you use the machine, so you need to be aware of the machine, cup, make adjustments, and then more pressure than competition. I don't think that exists. We will go into that section at the end, the best section to the end, the competition. But
yeah,
what you were going to say, Shelby?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, cupping is also just like a really helpful tool, not just for roast analysis, but kind of understanding your machine as well. Because like for us at Huckleberry, we roast predominantly on 2 different machines. And for me personally, like I try to keep certain profiles on one machine and other profiles on another machine, not necessarily just because like one machine is better than the other, but more because kind of a combination between one machine is bigger, so I'm going to put like my blenders on that machine. But sometimes you do have to roast the same coffee on both machines, and it's really important to be able to profile match those 2 things. And the best way that you can do that is just by cupping. You want to make sure that those 2 profiles that are on 2 different machines don't start getting further and further away the more that you're roasting those. But cupping also will let you know like if your machine has been neglected, because sometimes you'll start noticing that like your acidity is fading in coffee, and you know that can mean that the green itself is fading, or it can mean that your machine needs cleaning and that you're not getting the airflow that you need in that machine. So I know a lot of people who are not as crazy about cupping as we are here at Huck. We cup every single day, and we cup most of our production, if not at least one of each coffee that we're roasting. So anywhere between 15 and 22 coffees on the table at a time. And it's just really important for us to like constantly be knowing, hey, is this coffee okay? Is this tasting the way that it's supposed to? Or, you know, sometimes, hey, that tastes like way better than usual. I need to take a look at that roast curve and see, you know, what's going on that makes that coffee so much brighter. And then reset that as a profile, because we're always trying to make our coffee taste better.
And you mentioned when if it's not the coffee, it's the machine. And I remember Kevin also works at Huckleberry. He likes to cup the lots that we have there constantly, so to see if it's fading the coffee, besides just waiting for the cupping table. And so he's in constant quality control of the green.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to heads up.
Yeah, and he'll use it even as a tool of like future purchasing, which I think is really cool. Like we'll save a green sample from a lot that is now going to be gone. Like we're completely out of this lot. We'll save a green sample and we'll roast it, or he'll roast it like 8 months later to see how much that coffee has faded inside of that time. And then that will kind of give us an indication of how well that coffee is processed and how well that coffee holds up, so that when we buy that lot next year, if it's being processed at the same mill and that it's being processed just as well, we know, hey, this coffee actually lasts a lot longer. And even when it's past crop, it still tastes great. So like those are all really good things for us to know in our roastery, and that's something that cupping really helps us do.
So I have some questions for you, Shelby. We maybe have roasted assistants here. We have maybe production roasters, head roasters. Like, do you remember or talk just a little bit about each in your cupping experience in those 3, roasted assistant, production roaster, and head roaster? Like, what was your main, I don't know how to say, like, what, just
like what my function was?
If you remember something. Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. I was going to say paper, but it does in Spanish, so I was like, shoot, I'll just say, yeah, thank you.
So all of those positions are pretty different. I was really lucky. Danielle was the one who taught me how to cup, and he is really into being very critical of everything. And he wants very honest feedback. Coffee before I liked coffee. And every time that we cupped, he would ask me like, hey, what do you taste here? And he would never tell me like what he tasted there. He wanted to see what I could taste. And I think that as a production assistant, sometimes people's default is to default to the head roaster. They think like, oh, if I don't taste the same things, then I'm cupping incorrectly, or like my palate isn't very good, or I need to agree with this person because they're my boss. But actually, as an assistant, production assistant, your job is to A, build your palate because you're not quite there yet, and B, it's also to be able to disagree with your head roaster and give them more feedback, because you're not doing them any favors by just mirroring what they have said. Like, all you're doing is building their ego. You're not doing anything to actually help with the production. So I think like as a roasting assistant, that's like you're there to predominantly learn, and then on top of that, give honest feedback. Because, you know, head roasters, they need a second opinion. They need someone that they can trust, and they need to know that you're not just telling them like, oh yes, I also taste that. It's like, no, you need to say, oh no, I don't taste that, or I think this is really flat, and like be okay with arguing, which I think is kind of hard sometimes, because I think sometimes, you know, maybe someone who's your boss has a hard time hearing that because they think that they're correct. I don't know.
Yes.
And then let's see here. Yeah. So I mean, like roasting assistant is hard because you're just trying to
You're just bagging.
Totally.
You're bagging.
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
the machine.
For sure. Yeah, you're doing all of the dirty work, and
Cleaning the cuppings.
I mean,
Yeah.
What
about production? What about when you are actually the head roaster is tasting your coffee?
Yeah, so head roaster, I think that your main job is to have an idea of what all of your coffees taste like within your lineup, right? You need to know like when something is wrong, not just being able to do a qualitative analysis of saying like, oh, this has raspberry and lemon and medium body and etc. But it's like, well, actually this does not taste the way that it's supposed to. And now we need to reassess why that is. And then on top of that, your job is also to be setting roast curve profiles and managing those profiles, making sure that your coffees are within a reasonable window of error, obvious, because if you're manually roasting, like all your roast profiles should be pretty similar, but you're going to have some variance. Like if you have a roaster who is constantly off profile, there's either two things going on, like that person is either constantly on their phone and not paying attention, or there's something wrong with the roast profile and it's not something that you can follow. So you need to reset a curve. You know, you need to go in, you need to adjust that curve and make it so that it's something that's replicable. So I think that's kind of your main job as a head roaster, is to be cupping, know your coffee, set your curves, and make sure that those curves are repeatable. Because whether I'm roasting it or my production roaster is roasting it, or someone who's maybe stepping in for the day to help out is roasting it, they should be able to replicate that curve. And if they can't, then that's a problem, because, you know, I get sick or I go on vacation, and you need to have systems in place that make it that you're not, you know, the end all be all cog in that machine.
Yes, thank you. So the idea of this is roaster assistants are the one that start learning, setting the table. And the good thing about Cropster, when you have it in place, is understanding all the process to create a session in Cropster, setting up all the roast profiles, and that's the beginner, which is awesome for them to learn. And then as a production roaster, you are able to analyze the curves that the head roaster has set, try to follow it, and if the cupping show that is failing, that's why the head roaster is going to be there to explain why. And the best tool to use it is the roast analysis, right? I cannot just say by taste, oh shoot, this is long drying, and then I go and see the curve, and oh shoot, it was not long drying, it was another thing. So it's always better to have next to the roast the cup. After you separate it, we need to check this profile and then talk about it. And then head roasters are going to be the one. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that the roast analysis curve is a platform that's on Cropster is super, super helpful, just because all of your data is in one place. When you don't have a software like Cropster, you're taking all of your data from like sheets and then also like from your cupping sheet, and you're trying to kind of compile it all together. And for me, like the way that my brain works, being able to see all of that information in a single place is super helpful. And then not only that, but being able to lay it over top of a curve of the same exact coffee that maybe has a bit of variance in the way it was roasted, and then be able to see like the cupping notes and the cupping scores right next to that is really helpful, not just for learning about that coffee, but kind of learning about what flavors are created within coffee at what stages, and how, you know, taking a coffee a few degrees darker or a few degrees higher will change that coffee, so that when you're troubleshooting other coffees, you can kind of apply that knowledge. You're constantly doing a roast analysis of learning, like, oh, this is what creates these flavors, and I should apply that to other coffees as well.
Perfect. So I want to talk something about one of the different environments that was the hardest one for me, and I have this origin new to roasting home networking, but I want to go to this one. I wanted to use Kevin Cito right there. He is Kevin from Huckleberry. And I think there is a specific people for a specific cuppings, and this is a public cupping. Public cuppings are one of the hardest one for me. And the reason is what message do you want to put out there? And one of the things that I admire from Huck is that they were using the public cuppings at their coffee shops instead of the production, which is slightly the water is going to be different. The grinder is never been, it's not the same that you guys use at the warehouse. So that's when different variables are going to start changing. And I think you did some of them, right? You have done some public cuppings, right, Shelby?
Yeah, I did a few of those. Yeah.
How
And I mean, we still
them?
will do them for like groups that come in. I mean, I think that with cupping, you just have to decide what is the point of cupping? Like, why are we doing it today? And that reason can change all the time. Like my general mode of cupping is quality control, right? I'm always checking quality control or potentially checking new lots that are coming in, or a new roast of a coffee we just got in. But a public cupping is not for me, right? A public cupping is for the people who are coming to cup the coffee. These are people who are typically, not always, but typically not coffee professionals. They're just people who are interested in coffee. And, you know, a cupping to someone who's never seen a cupping before is, it's a lot of system that they have never seen before, right? It's interesting, it's new, it's fresh. If you cup every day, cupping tables are, you know, but it's not like, oh, what's going on over here? So the variables that you have inside of a public cupping for people who are just coming to your shop, I'm less concerned about like, oh, does this coffee taste exactly how it tastes in my warehouse? I just kind of give up a little bit of control on that and just know that it's going to be different. But it's also a really good thing to do is to cup on other systems, because then I can go, okay, well, wait, this tastes really bad on this water, and this is the water that is in our shop, and that's where most of our coffee is served. That could be an indicator of like, we need to go in and we need to see like something's wrong. Either something's wrong with the roast, or something's wrong with the water, or something's wrong with the grind setting, and we need to kind of figure out what's going on there. So yeah, for like public cuppings, the variables, I try really hard not to be too upset, and you're letting people who are not coffee people break the crust because it's fun and it gets them involved, and you're watching them dip the spoon all the way to the base of the cup, and you're like, but you just kind of, you know, it's like you let it go because you just can't control it. So like the point of a public cupping is for people to have fun, for people to be interested in coffee, to taste a big flight of coffee that they never would have tasted before, and hopefully walk out with a couple of bags of coffee.
Yeah, one of the hardest things for me was
I want them to buy coffee after that.
Yeah, I was by myself there. So when you cup the wrong one, it's like, it's just me, it's the water. So I don't have somebody else there with me that can tell me if it's just the water. So I always like, but it's
so hard not to get obsessive.
Yeah. But that's how I met Kevin. I met that day that I took this picture. That's how I met him, in that public cupping right there. It was awesome.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
The public cuppings are fun, and Pecos has that garage door that goes up, so it's like everyone's in the sun and hanging out on the patio.
He's so good at that. He was so good at that.
It's a great networking tool.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
really good at that. I
he puts
remember
on a
that.
good public cupping hat for sure.
The next one is events, competition, and one of the things I want to say is why we don't care to cup at the events, because of course they have water that is awesome already
Hmm.
made. The blend is perfect, the mix is perfect for extraction in coffee, and also the grinders are awesome. And so that's why for coffee professionals, cupping at events is so easy. And you just carry your
Yeah.
spoon in your pocket and you can jump in any cupping session and nobody is worried about anything. You can see
I
lines
saw
of people
somebody with
trying
like
to
a
cup.
spoon
Huh?
holster. Oh, I saw someone
Oh,
with like a
really?
spoon holster not at SCA, but I was just like, wow, you take that very
That's freaking
seriously.
awesome. I can see Jason, you guys, new employee, doing that with
Oh,
the
totally. Get
cluster. I can
himself a
see.
little a custom made leather holster for his, yeah, for his
Yeah, yeah.
things.
So what are your thoughts about cupping and events? Not competition yet, just
Um,
events.
just events. So usually when I cup at events, it's from green buyers who have brought like a bunch of their coffees that they're trying to sell. So for me, cupping at events is either A, I'm looking for coffees that I could potentially want to purchase, or B is more just like a networking tool. I honestly think that cupping at events is like 100% networking over just like I'm here to cup and to learn and to figure it out. And it's not to say that you shouldn't use events like that to learn. Like it's always great to taste coffee that you're not currently roasting or purchasing or anyone in your area is roasting, because it's good exposure to different types of coffee. But events for me, I think, they're 100% a networking
It's
opportunity.
a
You're
safe,
elbow to
it's a safe
elbow with a
place. Yeah,
bunch of people. Yeah, you're elbow
yeah,
to elbow
and
with a bunch of people tasting the same coffees and hanging out and exchanging numbers and building that network. So when you do have, if you have an issue, you can call someone that you've met at an event who lives in a completely different area, who maybe roasts on the same machine that you do, and that I think is the most valuable thing about cupping at events.
if you are a nerd like me, when I used to go to these events in a buying purposes, every time I gonna pick a coffee, you can create lots really fast, sample lots in Cropster, and have your cupping app immediately to cup.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saving papers and business cards, I always save the name of the
Mm-hmm.
coffee, who the importer was, or who is selling the coffee, and cup it and grade it just in case if I really liked it. And
Yeah, I
that's
mean, I
another
don't
way
know many
to,
people. Oh, I just don't know many people who can take the loose leaf information that they get at events and then store it in a logical manner that they can then recall on that information. And that's what I do like about Cropster. All of my information is in the same place. So I'm not looking at 10 different places to try to pool all that together. You just put all of your information into Cropster. It's a data entry tool that you can then use not just today, but you can use that information that you put in from SCA all the way to 3 years from now when you're like, hey, that was a really good coffee. I wonder what their coffee tastes like now. I can contact that importer. I can get a sample of their current lots. And that's just a great way to keep organized.
And another thing, this is got the same tip for copying our origin. And I have this picture here was in Colombia when I was working for a producer and exporter there. And the reason sometimes you don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have everything, but the good thing about Cropster Cup is that you can import Excel sheets and it will automatically create your log. So I usually have my spreadsheets in the phone because everybody, you go down there and everybody has spreadsheets copying with the phone and write it down. Usually you don't have Wi-Fi. When it's go like deep in small towns in Colombia, but usually those coffee regions have Wi-Fi as well, free from the government. But either way, so this is the same example of copying and save it on your score. And one of the things I really enjoy about that is a production roaster when he or she or he can read what the green buyer is copying and all the scores. Like it's amazing because you actually get excited of the coffees the head the green buyer is buying. Like check what I
Yeah.
scored, check this flavor notes. It's awesome because you get
Mm-hmm.
excited, right? As a production roaster, like, oh man, I'm gonna get.
I'm gonna get to
I always
roast that.
debate
Yeah.
myself if I wanted to be a green buyer or a production roaster. but I think
you don't have the stamina for the production roaster. You get bored too easily.
There you go. Yeah, I need to talk. I'm a talker.
Yeah.
So next one, what you already, the home roasters or new to roasting. This is when the grind or the water or this is not as important because we are learning still what that is. And I remember those back in the day. No, you just brew water with your tap water or stuff like that because you don't understand yet what the meaning of that. And I think new to roasting and home roasters, that's the only way.
Yeah.
Not meaning that you find those home roasters that are super snobby and awesome roasters. But I don't know. You have a comment right there, Shelby Sita, or?
Yeah, I think cupping is the best learning tool that you have as a home roaster, because you're able to take 3 of a coffee, because you're probably, as a home roaster, you probably have 1 coffee that you're roasting, right? You bought 1 5-pound bag of green and you're roasting that in a 500 gram sample roaster, and even if you don't have something like Cropster, but you have a temperature probe that you can kind of intake and log your own roast curves, being able to cup and understand like what flavors you're creating by making certain changes in the roaster is your number 1 tool to learn. Cupping and time and roast analysis is the only way that you're going to get any better. It's like all of the books and the tools and stuff, like those are all helpful, but I think that if you're a home roaster, like cupping is the best thing that you can do. And then once you kind of have a groundwork of how roasting works and what the processes are, then go and read all of those books, because if not, the vocabulary it'll just roll you. It's so hard to understand those books if you don't actually understand a little bit about roasting.
Yeah, and I'm glad you finished right there about roast analysis. That's what we're going to talk about now, that we already said, the cupping, understanding different environments of cupping and remote cupping. So let's talk about roast analysis. And as soon as you roast, you are profiling. What did you do, Shelby?
So this is like a new coffee that's just come in?
Uh-huh. I want to know about new coffee versus middle of the lot that you bought cupping, roasting.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So we have what we do is when we get a new coffee in, we typically will do a few different sample roasts of that coffee, and then we will cup all of those different profiles. I'm not a big believer in being able to transfer a perfect like a roast from a sample roaster onto a machine. It's just a completely different system, and I know that a lot of people disagree with me, but whatever.
It will be boring if nobody disagrees, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, some people get really defensive about it, and it's like, I really don't care. Like if you agree or not, like it's working for me, so that's what I'm gonna do. So when I do my sample roasts, I'm not doing like a purchasing sample roast where I make them really, really light so that you can kind of see like everything that's in that coffee. I'm actually trying to push it a little bit into more of like a production roast realm. And then I take a color reading so that I kind of know where I can get something similar on my bigger machine, right? So that's the first step is I cup, I kind of taste, okay, well, I really like these coffees, but if it's underdeveloped, it has these flavor notes, which I don't like. So I want to make sure that I'm going to take it to at least this level of development on my big machine. Because my biggest issue with roasting is I hate wasting coffee. I absolutely hate it. It crushes my soul whenever we have a roast that like is pretty unusable. And I mean, obviously we don't put it in the trash. Like we'll take it to the homeless shelter, or and we do donate stuff like that too. We'll try to find a home for it. But it's always really sad when you have a really nice coffee and then you do something horrible to it and you can't sell it, So my first job is to try to get an idea of where I want to take that coffee in the big machine. So my first roast out of the gate will maybe not be perfect, but it'll be sellable or usable within our own cafes. So then the next thing that I do is I will go into Cropster. I will take a profile of something similar to that coffee. So like if I'm like, okay, I want to take this coffee to about 10 minutes and I want to have a minute and a half development and I want to hit yellowing around this time, I'll find a curve that I've had in the past that's similar to that. And then you can create a profile within Cropster for that new coffee, because it is really important to stay organized. Sometimes when I'm short on time, I'll just like roast on a different profile, but then I have to go back into Cropster and I have to change it and I have to move it into a new profile. And you know, I'm busy, so sometimes I forget, and then I like to spend an hour looking for that profile. So what I'll do is I'll go into like the roast designer option, and I'll upload that curve that's similar into the roast designer, and then I will make a few adjustments in the comments to make it so that they're the adjustments I want to make during that roast. And you know, it's like coffee is totally different. A coffee that has the exact same moisture and the exact same density is not necessarily going to roast the same as that other coffee. I've had coffees that it's like, oh wow, this coffee follows this curve even though it's not for this coffee just right, and then right around first crack you get that like endothermic flash and it just dies.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, and you're at, you know, really high gas and you have no idea why that happened. But now it's like, okay, well now I know that, and next roast, like I can go back into my roast curve designer, I can take that and I can add gas comments in there to make sure that I keep that heat high, or I lower my airflow so I'm not totally pulling out all of the heat from that roast. So that's kind of what I do for a new coffee, is I basically gather as much information as I can from my sample roasts. I give a best guess based on a previous similar coffee. And then I end up roasting an entire production batch. We set it aside, we cup it. If it's good enough, we probably send it to our shops rather than to like customers who are purchasing it, as kind of like a precursor. Like we get a little sneak peek at our shops of what's new coming out. And then once I have like 1 or 2 more batches where we have that coffee exactly where we want it, then we release the coffee. Yeah. And then you asked like, oh, I was gonna say, you just asked about like the difference between that and then like production roasting.
The production, yes.
Yeah, and so like production is.
No, go ahead.
I was like, production is totally different. It's a little less of a mental exercise and more of like, you know, like that matching game, like where you're trying to find 2 of the same one. Like you're basically like, oh, does this taste the same as it did yesterday? Does this taste the same as the last batch? And then anytime you have variance, whether it's good or bad, you need to pull that sample aside. You need to go look at your roast curves. And if they're the exact, like if you look at your curves and they're exactly the same, but they taste wildly different, my first thought is, okay, my palate might have been a little off that day. You know, I didn't have coffee in the morning and the first coffee I tasted was cupping coffee. And so maybe that affected it. Or I brushed my teeth right before I got here. Maybe that affected it. And then you're going to reset that coffee up again, cup it. If you have the same exact results, cup it blind. If you have the same exact results, meaning that like this coffee still tastes very different than the previous roast of it, now you know that you might be having like a green coffee change. Something might be happening inside of that actual lot. And the, you know, coffee is an organic material, so it's constantly breaking down at some level. Something is changing within that lot. It's aging for better or for worse. And now we need to make an adjustment to that profile to keep it where you want it as a part of your lineup.
I want to say something right there when you say blind. One of the things I forgot to mention is that we, back in the day when we used to work together, all our cuppings were blind. Back then, I don't remember if we were using Cropster the settings for the blind cupping or we were doing it ourselves. But if you are willing, if you're willing to do blind cupping, especially for one of the, I encourage a lot, is when you have new coffees and when you send it to your baristas to taste it, do this sneak peek, try to make them cup. And the easiest way is the blind cupping, setting up like ABC or 1, 2, 3 in Cropster Cup. And in that way, they don't have any mental note, oh, it's a Rwanda, oh, it's Colombian, it's going to be good, or nothing, just numbers. Yeah. And it's easier for you to analyze the report of quality that Cropster shows you, how calibrated they are with your cupping, which is awesome. And one of the things we used to do together was guessing the coffee. I love that. Trying to guess the coffee because you should know the coffee. and it was fun. It
Absolutely.
was really fun. And another
Yeah,
thing I
I
wanted to
still do
say,
that as a part of my cupping regimen. I'm still always trying to find which coffee is which. And when I'm wrong, it's either like, okay, I either have two coffees that are too similar in this coffee lineup, or something's wrong with this profile.
Shelby, I have a question. What about when people want a cup but not using the cupping system and just brewing coffee? What are your thoughts about instead of cupping, which is a brewing of submersion, versus pour over?
Like filter versus like cupping filtered coffee versus cupping
Yeah,
just like cowboy coffee.
yeah.
Um,
I didn't know they call it cowboy coffee.
yeah, no filter. It's like when you're camping, we call it cowboy
Oh,
coffee. Yeah,
interesting.
except they don't remove the crust. They just drink it because
Oh,
it's more
interesting.
manly that way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that happened to me back. That one of my bosses, Dave, he likes to after cupping just brew it because he didn't trust the cupping. But I think it's different approach. But yeah, I'll let you go for it.
totally. Um, so as a roaster, your job is to find like cupping is really transparent, right? You get everything that is in that coffee. So for me, I feel like if I cup a coffee and it's tasting fantastic, there are no defects in that coffee. It doesn't taste underdeveloped. It doesn't taste roasty. It doesn't have any of those problems. I feel like when it gets filtered, even fewer of those problems are showing up. Like right now, we have a coffee that's a little papery because it's getting old. And so we're trying to roast away so that's not really there. And when we cup it, we can taste that paper, but when we brew it, you can't taste it. And so I think that if you're brewing coffee as a source of your quality control, I mean, you're not really giving yourself the best roast of that coffee. Like you're basically saying, okay, well, this is what it tastes like in the shop. This is how we're gonna roast it. That's fine. But you're not really tasting like all of the defects that could be in that coffee. And the problem with that is, so you send out a coffee to a subscriber or to a shop, and their main method of brewing is French press because that's just the way that they do it, you know? And now you've got someone who is brewing your coffee without a filter, and you have no idea of the defects that you taste in a brew method like that. So cupping coffee is really designed to show you everything that is wrong with your coffee. It doesn't mean that that's how it's going to taste on a brewer. It just means that, hey, this coffee doesn't have any of the defects that I'm trying to avoid. I mean, I know like when you and I worked at Corvus, there were many times where we'd have a coffee cupped and it tastes amazing, and then brewed it just isn't quite as bright, it's not quite as sweet, and you and I would be like dishing the cupping coffee into our cups because that's what we wanted to drink because that tastes way better to us. So I mean, like, I don't think it's wrong. I just think that you're kind of stunting your ability to quality control your coffee to the fullest extent.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump there too to say we have a green buyer quality control person that is constantly cupping and setting all this data to Cropster, but we also have the trainer at the coffee shop. We have this person that trains your baristas, and he or she or they need to be able to access to Cropster as well and learn the cupping and learn all this data that he has to enter there because he's going to be our bridge of communication with the coffee shops. And I'm not sure if I should say this, but we with the new product that Cropster is working, I was going to say Corvus, you say Corvus. Cropster is working is cafe, and that's going to be awesome in order for roasters to understand the perspective or the perspective of brewing coffee and how we can adjust also as well in that. And I know we are almost short in time, so we need to jump into one example that Shelby brought us of one of her coffees that she roast, and this is the profile. This is some airflow and gas comments, and this is where I wanted to start the summary of the coffee that she cupped, and I just let you take it from here because I was not there.
All right. So this coffee is a coffee that's in our current lineup. The score on it, you can kind of ignore it. It's like an 87. plus coffee. It's a really nice, washed Ethiopian, nothing necessarily extravagantly fantastic about it, but it's really good. The 7 is it's an in-house scoring system that we use for quality control, just because, doing an SCA full cupping of all of our coffees all the time is insanely time consuming, so we don't do that. But the reason that I brought this curve is I feel like this is a good example of how to use roast analysis, not just for when your curve is really, really ugly. So this curve in particular, the traditional curve, it's got the descending rate of rise. It's, within like a normal time frame. But my score on it is a little lower than usual. Like for a great cupping score in-house, we want like closer to an 8. So this means that this was not as good of a roast as my other ones. And then if you look at the cupping notes on there, I mean, there really isn't a lot on there. It's just like graham cracker and lemon. And so to me, just based on experience, I go, okay, well, graham cracker can mean perhaps it's a little underdeveloped or potentially a little baked. So I'll go back, I'll look at this curve, and it is pushed up against the profile as well. If you can see that, the lighter transparent line is the profile. And then I'll notice at the end, there's a lot of space where it seems like the coffee is just kind of riding at the same temperature for a long time. So I would look at this and go, okay, well, maybe I need to increase the heat at the end, take it a few degrees higher so that the coffee isn't just stalled out for that long. I just think that, a lot of people get really hung up on the way that roast curves look like, and I think that it's important to talk about how like pretty curves don't necessarily produce perfect results. Like if someone showed me this curve, I'd be like, yeah, this looks great, but we have to go back to the cupping table. We have to cup it, decide, hey, what's wrong with this? Okay, it might be a little underdeveloped. How can I adjust this? So then if I wanted to make sure that like my production roaster would also be able to make this change, like I don't have to be on the floor to do it. What I can do is I can go in, I can set this as a profile, or even just go into that profile, edit the curve, and I can add comments into the curve itself. So that in the morning when they sync the Cropster, what is it, the platform that's on the computer, yeah, the roaster intelligence, when they sync that, this profile will show up and it'll have my comments in there. And usually what I do is I just put, instead of changing the gas, because I don't want to like confuse my production roaster to be like, wait, why is this curve reacting differently? I want them to know, hey, this is a change that I'm making. So what I'll end up doing is I'll put comments in all cap locks so that they know that it's from me and that it's like a trial basically. And I'll say like, start this roast, 10 degrees hotter, try to get into yellowing 30 seconds faster. And then maybe at the end, I'll put like a comment, before they need to see the comment about like, hit first crack at this time and push to 406. If I'm just trying to get them to do what I would do to the machine or to that coffee, putting in those comments is really helpful, because then literally anybody who roasts that coffee is next. And if you do as many batches as we do in a day, it's like, I can't constantly be trying to, oh, hey, I need you to do this. And then I need that person to remember to do that, or I need to do it and I need to remember to do that. This way, when that coffee comes up on my roast schedule, I just pull up the curve and I see my notes from that previous cupping session that I entered immediately after. And I make sure that roast gets done, if that makes sense. Because then, yeah, it's just like a way of like putting it in your calendar so that you don't have to actually remember to do it. Like your calendar just tells you to do it.
Yeah, and sometimes another thing that when you say about the curve how it looks, remember that we are setting up the rate over ice in a specific amount of time. So lower the time or shorter the time you are measuring is going to be more sensitive. So we also be aware of what you guys are using as, what are you guys setting up as that.
Yeah.
And also, I'm glad that you mentioned the edit. When you edit your curve, there is different ways to help production roasters to do it. One way is what Shelby mentioned, adding the notes so they can read as they go. And that's another way to make sure they're actually reading. Sometimes you find them in the phones, but that's another topic. We don't talk about that here. But also,
sometimes you find Danielle on his phone when he's roasting.
Yes. The other thing is you can change the adjustments. You can also change, if, for example, in this curve, it's gas at the beginning, the first gas is 6.6, and you want to extend the drying, so maybe just change it immediately to 5. And that will be the only adjust that I will do, let's say that. And then in the comments, you can say just follow the parameters, so the set points, forget about how it looks like. And let's just copy it again and then do it that way.
I personally don't do that for like coffees that are in the lineup. I only do that for like new coffees where I'll go in and change the gas adjustment, because like with current coffees, if you change that gas adjustment, then you'll like lose what the initial gas adjustment is. And if that's like, if we do that and then it tastes bad, it's like, nah, I have to like climb. I was just explaining.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. That's just how I do it.
Yeah, let's go back, is your machine. Head roasters need to know your machine really well, how it works, so you can pass on that. We are almost 10 minutes, so we need to work fast in this one. So I wanted to put this picture, is one of my favorite moments I have spent in my coffee career, was being with her, with Shelby, at the world competition. It was super fun, and it's just the purest, a pure laugh. That was it was such an awesome time. I'm really glad Huckleberry and the company that I used to work there, they helped me out to go with her. And now, what is cupping for in competition in like an SCAA here in the US and then in Taiwan?
Yeah, I mean, cupping for competition is a totally different game. Number one, you know that the people who are going to be cupping and judging your coffee are using different water than what's in your warehouse, right? So at the early stages of competition where you're cupping in your warehouse and then you submit a coffee that you roasted in your warehouse to someone else who's going to grind it on a different grind setting and use different water than you are, there is just a lack of control that you have over that. So, I mean, what I do for cupping for those competitions is I just pool as many roasters as I trust, as I physically can, into the same room. We all cup the coffees and give tasting notes and just try to find like the best common denominator roast and the best common denominator cupping notes. And that's kind of how I deal with like cupping for competitions, because it's not about what I'm tasting, it's about what other people will be tasting, right? And then competitions often do release the water that they're going to be using to cup that coffee. And so if you can track down that water and buy some so that when you cup your coffee, it's as similar as it can be. And then you have to keep in mind as well that like if you're traveling to a different location, like I lucked out, my first competition was in Denver. But if you're traveling somewhere where it's a totally different environment, it's important to take your coffee with you, like a portion of that coffee with you, and cup it at the location with their water, and so that you can get more accurate tasting notes to what they will be tasting. So it's just like a totally different environment. It's less about like roast analysis, and it's often more about like, what is here? What do I taste? And what is the most common thing that is being tasted inside of this coffee? It's a competition. I'm trying to play the matching game. I want to match the judges. That's my but then like when you move on to the US competition, it's very different because you're cupping in like this weird pig pen that they've set up for you where like no one else is allowed in, but people are standing outside of this, like taking pictures of you. And, you know, like most roasters who work in a warehouse really, they don't enjoy that. They don't enjoy people watching them. It's not a comfortable situation, and it's really hard to focus on like what you're doing. So all of a sudden you have this very different environment that you're cupping in. And I think that's like the main difference is sometimes you're just like, that person is looking at me and you can feel it, and like your whole body can feel it, and you can't focus on what you're cupping. And for me, like I always you see me everywhere with big headphones on because I'm trying to completely tune out everything that is around me. But again, like it's just weird because it's like a different water, different cup, different grinder, different everything, different cupping bowls, which means like the brew ratio could be off. And some competitions will let you like bring your coffee in from your warehouse to cup. So then you can kind of see like, okay, well, I know this coffee. I know how it tastes in my warehouse. Now I can cup it on their system. What's the difference. Oh, things are a little brighter on their water, or things are a little like less fruity on their water. Okay, I'm going to factor that into my roast plan. So those things are kind of helpful for competition. World competition, I think I blacked out at some point while we were cupping, and it was just so many people taking pictures, and it was absolutely terrifying. And it's just, it's very distracting at competition, I would say. But like, I mean, I remember that moment that photo was taken, you and I were laughing about a burnt sample roast that I had. And so it's just funny that like you captured that moment where I was like, we were like talking about all the coffees that were good, and then we got to that one and I was like, oh, it tastes really bad. And we just started laughing, and it's just like, you know, like cupping at competitions is fun, and but I think it's just a totally different skill set, you know. It's shooting from the hip and trying to get the best result that you can from that.
And I think I wish I'm one of, hopefully we still do it, but one of the judges for the US, and seeing the world how good. I wish we can replicate exactly what they do there. It will be so good.
It's totally
especially
different.
For feedback for roast. Yeah, it's completely different. And just to see the judges and talk to them, they are all super pro people, like Q graders, like so much experience. Sadly, in the US, we don't have that many. But let's talk that another topic. But another thing that is going to help you if you guys want to compete is always remember how you analyze your roast with the cupping. For some reason in the world, they use Cropster for the roast, but for cupping, no. So one of the things I started learning from that experience is back to memory, like what happened with the roast went like this, what happened, how I can make it taste like this so judges will like it. So it just brings you back all what you do at your own production or analyzing your coffee. So
sure. I mean, learning to make adjustments on machines that aren't yours is super important. So like even just like doing roast analysis between cupping score and your own machine, it will help you so much when you're looking at those competition score. I mean, like at like 3 a.m, trying to figure out how you're going to make changes to your roast to make it taste a certain way. I think that roast analysis is really just your best friend. Roast analysis and learning machine manipulation is the best thing that you can do for preparing for competition.
So you are those that want to compete, start practicing so much with Cropster, analyzing what the coffee is going to do, make adjustments, prognosticate like what's going to happen, and try to write it down to see what happens. And I think we are on time. I don't know if you want to finish with something, encouragement, or how they can reach out to you if they want to.
Yeah, I mean, you can always reach out to me through Instagram. If you just type my name in, I should pop up. If you have any questions, I'm always more than willing to help people out. I will say the one thing about competing that you should know if you go to world competition is when they send you your curves, they send it to you in Celsius, even if you roasted it in Fahrenheit. So yeah, get those conversions in your head real well, because that took me a few hours to work out exactly what was wrong with my roast curves. So I mean, that is kind of the disadvantage of roasting in Fahrenheit as an American.
Maybe it was Cropster's fault.
Yeah, Cropster. What happened there? No, like all of my comments were in Celsius, and I was like, I'm screwed.
Yes, thank you guys. Yeah. Thank you so much, Shelby. It was awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed. Any question? I don't know if there is some question now. I don't even know how this works. That's when my friend...
I think if you go to the participants, maybe they're, I don't know.
Yeah, I knew this was going to happen. That's my wife sending me kisses. Sorry. I don't know. Oh, yeah, chat. Shelby, you can see the chat. Help me out, Shelby-cita.
I'm looking.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to find it.
Boom, found it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice. So many. Thank you for hosting. Certain solution. Kevin McNeil, C4. Supply chain solution. Oh, that's for the...
Oh, we never talked about quarantine cupping.
Yes. So I'm always in quarantine. I'm working from home with kids. So I help. I'm from Colombia, so I help one of my good friends in Colombia that are producers, they send samples and I cup them and use Cropster to send them the feedback. Sadly, I use an Anchor and a Settle 270, so it's not like the perfect grinder. And I'm trying to use reverse osmosis. So I'm trying, and then add some minerals to it. I try my best, but I know it's gonna be always off some points. But they are aware of it, and I am aware of it. So in quarantine, when I went to some visiting for helping roasters, they always want me to jump in a cupping. So I know Royal Oakland did some amazing tips to doing it. Of course, if you feel bad, don't do it. How you guys did it at Huckleberry?
So we've actually just started all cupping separately, and then using Cropster Cup has been really helpful because all of our notes are logged. So you can cup and then immediately look at somebody's notes and kind of see how similar you are. And then we usually like try to find a time to meet up and kind of chat about it. But basically I'll come in, I'll set up everybody's cupping at one time, like with gloves and a mask and everything. And then I will push, you know, Kevin and Mark's cupping back. I will cup my round. I'll log everything, and then I clean it, wipe everything down, make sure like with disinfectant and rubbing alcohol, everything I touched, and then the next person will come up and they will do their cupping, and then same thing, they'll log it. They'll be able to look at my scores and see how similar they were. Yeah, I mean, like for us, like we cup in dead silence anyway, so like it's not totally like that much different besides just not being able to talk to each other immediately after. But I think that that's been really helpful, just kind of separating out our cupping times to make sure that we're kind of staying safe, because cupping is kind of gross. Like we're slurping in coffee and spitting it out, and it's like that's like the number one transmission issue is from like aerosol that's in the air. I don't have a mask on right now because I'm just in my office, so anybody who comes in here, too. It's like at their own risk. So yeah, but like when we're cupping, we don't have a mask on because you can't, so we don't have anybody else in our cupping loft while someone is cupping, so we're just kind of separated out. We're not.
And I was thinking it's good for now that it's quarantine that you have to do not be all together, because sometimes our faces affect, especially one of the person that ask like me as a assistant roaster, how can I make change or influence a decision about the coffee. Sadly, it's really hard. Because how can I say this? It's all tasting. We are all grading the coffee, whatever grade that you guys use. And I forgot to mention that when you use Roast Professional, you can add your cupping sheet. You don't have to use any SCAA. You can add the one that you are using. But as an assistant roaster, the best thing to do is give feedback. It doesn't mean it's going to change, but that's the way you learn. And the way that if I receive feedback from my assistant, the way that I interact that feedback, you can correct it. Like, may actually you are tasting this because of this. And no, sometimes even when we talk about Shelby point out so many good things, and I may change it. It's a lot about teamwork, right? And I don't think coffees for all is not for me. It was not what I'm a roaster. It's not what me, like Daniel thinks what it should taste. I think everybody feedback is good.
For sure.
And also that somebody mentioned the hooky, and we love the hooky. Shelby and myself grew up with the hooky in the coffee industry. So
I mean, I think awesome. even as a head roaster, if you're listening to the cupping results of your roasting assistant and you're making adjustments based on that, that can be like a really good moment for that production roaster or that assistant who's just learning and feels like maybe they're adding something. If you want to test to make sure that your production roaster or your roasting assistant is not just like agreeing with everything that you say, I would say number one, just like let them speak first is an easy way to do. Or you can do what Danielle used to do to me and switch coffee tins so that you'll taste one that is like your darkest coffee and you're like, oh, that's clearly this coffee. And then you'll flip the tin and like have if they're like, oh, I thought that it was this coffee. And if they don't freak out a little bit and kind of like, that doesn't taste like that, I'm pretty sure that it's this coffee. You can tell that they're
twice. We cup in twice, remember? Twice. And then we change completely. Because sometimes we are, when you are always looking to the head and what people are tasting, because you are always afraid. But either way, quarantine, I think, is going to help you there is nobody around you, so it's just you scoring,
Mm-hmm.
and the scores are gonna show whoever is the lead, whoever is the quality control person is gonna show you need more training or you need help in order to understand the coffee. It's gonna show the
Mm-hmm.
reality of your palate, because always in a company, whoever buys the coffee or sets the flavors, those are the ones that you should reach out to help. If you don't taste the same, why? Ask
Mm-hmm.
how I can taste that, and then they can do the flavor cuppings and all that. So Cropster is going to help you so much when you learn how to read it, when you learn to report the quality report. It's going to show you all how calibrated you are with your head roaster, production roaster, even as a
Mm-hmm.
barista. And you see your calibration is completely off.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So let's learn. Let's help me. Why cannot taste that? So it's going to show you a reality of your palate. If you need to grow, or actually you are on point with the roaster and you are not working together, that means you truly understood the coffee and it's awesome. So I think we have to
Yeah.
go. Thank you so much, guys. My email is right there. Feel free to reach out. Happy to help. Thank you so much for everyone. Have a good one.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Bye.